Hey, this is Chris, keeping it real, facts over fear. How you doing this week? I'm on vacation. I'm going to be missing today's data, but I went ahead and decided to publish this because I do not have time the rest of the day today, nor do I have time tomorrow to do anything on my vacation. So we're busy today and traveling tomorrow back home. The first thing I wanted to call your attention to is the curve of the number of cases. See, we had a peak back in mid to late July, and now we're having another peak here in the first week of November. You would think that might push the curves to the left, since we have such a big increase in cases, but they're not. The overall curve, which is the blue line, continues to move right, and it continues to move right because even though there's more cases, there's not a lot more cases. And so as a percentage of previous cases, the percentage of new cases compared to the total number of cases overall declines. And so that's why you can see that this line continues to move to the right. So we would have to see a huge increase in cases for the blue line to move to the left. And that's just kind of how a pandemic works when you're looking at the percentages of things. You notice I added a curve for when North Carolina entered phase 3, and so that is the red line right there. I wanted to wait about a month before I included that data, before I broke that data out, just so we could get a better idea. So we can see how this curve is going. Notice that from about the mask mandate to now, it's pretty much a linear line. If I did some kind of equation to kind of try to describe that, it would be a straight line going down. And I'm not going to say what angle, because I don't, I've not scaled this graph in any certain way, but it's regardless of what the actual slope of that line is, it is linear. Notice that the yellow line is left of the green line. The yellow line is shut down to 904, which includes about 10 weeks of a mask mandate. You would have expected the green line you would have expected the yellow line to be to the right of the green line. If the mask mandate had done any good, you would expect that to have moved right, because we would have expected to see far fewer cases. Far fewer cases means we extend out the line of herd immunity to the right, because it would have slowed the amount of cases, and therefore our approach to herd immunity would have been slowed. Therefore that yellow line would have been to the right, but it's not. It's way to the left. And so that calls into my mind, makes me question. Of course, I'm not for masks anyway, and I admit that. Not because of this graph, because there's no scientific evidence, no real scientific evidence that supports wearing them. But yeah, that's not really good. That's not a really good look for people who say masks do something useful. Notice how the blue line is coming ever closer to the green line. I expect them to converge at the y-axis sometime in 2 weeks. Also notice that cases are up, but the curve is flattening. I just went over that a little bit, so I don't need to go over it again. I wrote this last week, and it's still, I think it's holding. I think far more than anything else in this pandemic, it has been the attitude of the population that has determined where this virus went, except for possibly, even the first shutdown, which was almost a total shutdown of the economy, I think it was adhered to far more because people were truly worried about what was going on, and a lot less because somebody said you can't go out and do anything. Now, we'll never know, right? We'll never know what would have happened if nothing had been done. But still, I think it is the attitude of the people, and I think that's really playing into what's going on here. So people are sick and tired of this. They are convinced that masks work, and they have a false sense of security when the masks don't work. And I demonstrated that in this point here. Also, a lot of public schools are opening up. WRL had a story, of course, that said elementary schools are not a significant vector for the coronavirus. I don't know how they could know that. I don't think they're contact. You can't contact trace somebody if there's a bunch of people in elementary school and they all get coronavirus, but none of them have any symptoms. It's kind of hard to contact trace anybody. You can't trace them to their family or anything else. And I think the level of contact tracing is not nearly high enough to make statements like that. Common sense tells me that when you mix a bunch of little kids together and you expect them to wear, well, even if they wore masks, it wouldn't matter. They're still going to spread it because that's what elementary kids do. They spread disease, and then they take it home to their parents and then their grandparents and their families. The 14 daily rolling average, and I say change this from a 7-day rolling average because it more closely aligns with the timeline of COVID-19 infections. So that brings us back up to this little chart here that I mentioned previously. Rose from 2208 to 2337. So last week it was 2208. This week's 2337. It looks like I probably was off a little bit on my estimation it was going to reach 3,000 because it has flattened, even though the last 2 days are, and that's why I really wanted to wait to do today, and I might do an update. I will probably do an update on Monday on this, on the curve, to see if it has any effect on anything or to see if there's a lot more cases reported. It looks like we are peaking. That line has definitely flattened over the last 3 days, and you would not expect that to happen on Thursday and Friday, but that is indeed what is going on. It's starting to flatten out. So I don't think we are going to even hit 2,400 now, and I expect that next week we will start to see either continued flattening or a slight decrease beginning to happen. So it looks like the peak is near, or this might be it. Deaths peaked at 38 2 days ago. I expected 40, and I don't expect them to rise again. The number of hospitalizations has also seemed to have flattened out. It has peaked over the last several days, and they do hospitalizations. The graph is a straight 7-day rolling average, and so I don't have to do any data work on that. It looks like the population, so my main premise is, in describing how this disease is spreading, is the mixing of the population. So it looks like this remixing of the population has pretty much run its course. In other words, we've had phase 3 opening. We're having kids back in school, and we've had the expected increase in the number of cases that you would think. Somewhat surprising that there were that many people left to be infected. On the other hand, if you look at the graph and you say, well, only about half the population's been infected, best case scenario. That still leaves a whole lot of people to be infected. And of course, people with children, they've been at home. Daycares are open too, by the way. But they have been. But I think there are a lot more open now. This mixing of the population, I can't foresee another reason why there would be another huge mix of the population. Like, for example, I think if they were to open up the economy and everybody went to a football game, I just don't know I don't know that there's enough people left to do another big spike. I think there's enough to keep going, but of course my graph is indicating that we may be so close to the end of this that it's amazing. So we will just have to see. I do expect cases and deaths to trend downward no matter what happens, be it middle school and high schools opening or a total reopening of the economy. I just don't think there's enough people left to really cause another true spike. We might have some ups and downs, but I'm really hoping my graph is right. If my underlying assumptions are true, the NC North Carolina has seen well over 50% of its citizens contract COVID-19. We only need 1.8 million more cases for herd immunity. So, in other words, we are up to about approximately 5.2 million people have had it. 4.8 million people have not had it. So as that balance tips, as we start seeing more and more people having had it and less people able to get it, we are going to see a natural decrease in the number of cases. And unfortunately, I think what's going to happen is everybody's going to draw the wrong conclusion and say that masks work, and without looking at the math. So if the math works, then we know the math didn't work. If the math doesn't work, then then I'll have to change my opinion about things. All right, well, that's what we got for this week. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the section below. Like and subscribe. We appreciate when you do. And we'll see you on the next real video.